this didn't happen to other people. And that was, what I feel like her words inspired the idea. Sorry, I'm distracted.
You
Just
went out a
pause.
second.
Yeah.
I just turned the volume down. I hope.
Oh,
that's probably-
okay. All right.
Will that
It was-
work?
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that I was going to say the irony of that was that I felt like her words inspired something else in you. Not that you learned the lesson that she thought you should learn, but that you learned a different kind of lesson and that you didn't want this to happen to other women.
Well, this is my perspective. My perspective is when bad things happen, I think there's a book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People, but when bad things happen, you can learn something from it.
Mm-hmm.
There are teaching moments in all of that. Sometimes you don't know exactly the purpose then, and of course all of us would prefer if bad things didn't happen, even if we learned something from it.
Yeah.
But it's going to happen to everyone. Everyone has a number of challenges in their lives, different challenges. None of us are spared. I don't care who we are. I don't care what gender, race, religion, you know, physical condition, sexual orientation, gender. We all have challenges. And so the question is, how do we cope with those challenges, and what do we learn from those challenges that can help us later, that can help others, family members, co-workers, members of our community,
Right.
and to make this a better world. So sometimes we don't know until later what that purpose was,
Right.
whether or not that was, there was a purpose in that. But I think we can all learn from that and help to make this a better world when we realize what it is we can learn from that.
Yeah. Well, you certainly do that. And that kind of brings me to my next question, which is you've probably done the most for women's rights than anybody I know about, from what I've seen and what I've seen on television, what I've read about you.
Well, I give credit to my clients, of course, because I
Of
couldn't have
course.
done it without them.
Yes. But I don't know, you see injustice. This is what I see from my perspective. You see injustice, whether it's winnable or not, whether it's changeable or not, you go up against it.
Well, sometimes, if we can, and we have to assess the facts in each case. But, if we feel that it shouldn't happen, okay, that, for example, the case we had early, I think it was 1983, the two women that we represented, is for a famous case, Rowland versus Kowalski, involved Papa Shoe Restaurant in Los Angeles, where our two clients, an African-American woman and a Latina woman,
Yes.
went into Papa Shoe Restaurant to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. And they had made a reservation, and they were life partners. And they went and they had reserved the private booth in the romantic section of the restaurant. You walked up a few steps, and there was about, I think, a semicircle of booths with sheer curtains, and you could sit there, and the violinist would stroll by playing.
Right.
And it was, very nice area of the restaurant for romantic dining. And so they were seated there, and then they alleged that someone came up from the restaurant, I don't know, it's a maitre d' or someone else, and told them there's been a mistake. They can't sit in that booth. It's only for couples. And of course they thought, well, what are we? We're a
Right.
couple. It's only for essentially opposite sex couples.
Mm.
And they would have to move. They could sit anywhere else in the restaurant, but not in the section for romantic dining. And they said, well, why? They said, well, there's a house policy. Two people sitting of the same sex can't sit in these booths. So they said, well, we want to see, I think, the owner or somebody higher up in the restaurant. And so that person came, and the person who came said, well, actually, they said there really is a city ordinance, a city law that prohibits two people of the same gender sit in this romantic section of the restaurant. And they said, well, we're businesswomen, we're not lawyers, but we just can't believe there's a law, a city ordinance that says two people of the same sex can't sit in the romantic section. And so then they said publicly later, we thought about, well, what would Martin Luther King Jr. want us to do? Sit in the back of the bus, so to speak, in the main section of the restaurant, or go to Gloria Allred. And they said he would want us to go to Gloria Allred. So they did come to me, and we had to decide, well, wait a minute, is this a ridiculous case? Because after all, they could still get a meal.
Right.
Or is this an important civil rights case? And so then we decided, if we thought that Rosa Parks having to sit in the back of the bus was an important case, even though she would still get a bus ride,
Mm-hmm.
then this was an important case, because this is really about not the dinner, it's about respect and dignity and treating individuals who are part of a minority, in this case, two women who happen to be lesbian, with respect and dignity and equality.
Right.
And so we did file the case. The judge decided he wanted to go see the booth, which of course factually didn't matter because everybody agreed on the facts. It was really a question of law, but we went. And anyway, he ruled against us. We went up to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal reversed,
The
and we
judge
won.
ruled against you.
Yeah, the lower court,
Yeah.
which often happens because then new law essentially is made by the Court of Appeals, not by lower court judges.
Mm-hmm.
And there had been no case like this before.
Right.
But we went up to the Court of Appeals, and they reversed the lower court judge, and we won a legal precedent, which we were able to cite in cases after that. And the precedent was that businesses were not allowed under our state Civil Rights Act to discriminate on account of sexual orientation or gender.
Yeah.
And so that was very important, and we've had a long string of cases involving discrimination against individuals who were gay or lesbian, who had AIDS or perceived to have AIDS, and on and on. So ever since that time. So the point of all that is that we perceived it just wasn't right.
Right.
It wasn't what the law should be, if in fact that's what it was. But we thought there was a chance that we could change it, and we decided to take the case, and we're so glad
Mm-hmm.
that we did.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's interesting because one of the lawyers on the other side at one point came up to me in the hallway and said, "Gloria, we didn't know they were lesbians.
No.
They were dressed so nicely."
Oh. Oh boy.
Yeah, or "Oh girl."
Oh girl.
But anyway, so yeah, those were the days. And
Yeah.
so we have a long string of cases that we did because we just think we thought it was wrong.
Yeah. Well, and I think I remember that the restaurant owner was so angry about having to open those booths that he closed them all.
At
right?
some point,
Yeah.
At some point, the restaurant went out of business, which
Yeah.
we didn't really care about because that's not our issue. They could stay in business, they just can't discriminate. But if they want to go out of business, that's up to them.
Yeah.
This is the same restaurant that there was actually a report in a magazine, even before our case, that had monkeys in the restaurant fornicating.
Right.
So
Yes.
that was so weird. And yet, two women who
Yeah.
weren't even kissing. They were just sitting there
Right.
wanting to have dinner to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. That somehow was not acceptable.
But it's a matter of equality, right? It's like
But
when
it's equality under the law.
yes.
That's what we're about. We're about the
Right.
justice piece. We're not just about providing a voice for minorities and women, although that was important.
Mm-hmm.
And we had our clients speak out because they wanted to and because we thought that would be a teaching moment also for the public, because mostly gays and lesbians were in the closet at that time. And so there were all kinds of stereotypes about, well, what is a person?
Yes.
What does she look like? What does she sound like if
Right.
she's a lesbian?
Yeah.
And so they were very articulate and they spoke out, and I thought that was extremely important, because change is when people can see who the people are who are victims
Mm-hmm.
and understand what the problem is and hear from the victim and understand why there needs to be a change and how the victims are working to win that change. And so I give them a lot of credit for having spoken out, especially at that time.
Sure.
Things have changed so much in the last, I don't know how many years, 20, 40, more than 40, 45 years, but only because individuals fought to win that change.
Right.
I always say nobody ever gave women any rights at all. No one gives any rights to women and minorities today. We always have to fight to win them.
Yep. Well, and I'm thinking about the case where I forgot the woman's name, but she was a member of a country club and wasn't allowed to golf.
I've had many cases like that. Yeah.
And then but the times or dates where she could play, and she was an equal dues paying member, were not equal.
Yeah, mostly the preferable tee times,
Right.
tee off times
Yes.
were given to the men,
Mm-hmm.
and then the women got the less desirable tee times.
Right.
And or in some cases they weren't permitted into private clubs at all.
Yes.
So we fought that battle. I became the first woman member of the Friars Club
Yes, that's what I was going to ask you about
in
next.
Beverly Hills.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Milton Berle inducted me.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, and so that's the whole story in and of itself. And then I went to New York because male California friars had reciprocal privileges to go to the Friars Club, Celebrity Club in New York. But then they wouldn't let me make a reservation for lunch there because they said no women are allowed at lunch. You can't even bring our secretaries or wives.
Wow.
They didn't say or our mistresses, but I
Right.
gather that's
It's
probably
implied.
was part of their problem too.
Yeah.
But anyway, I said, well, don't think of me as a woman, just think of me as a California friar.
Right.
And they wouldn't let me make a reservation for lunch. So I filed the first complaint of discrimination against a private club in New York with the New York City Commission on Human Rights. They found that there was probable cause to believe I was discriminated against on account of my gender. And then the U.S. Supreme Court took up the issue of whether private clubs in New York were permitted to discriminate or not. And they found that the Supreme Court decided, no, the ordinance, that is the city law in New York, which prohibited gender discrimination by private clubs, could be upheld, was constitutional.
Mm-hmm.
So when that happened on a Monday, I immediately called the New York club. I was in Los Angeles in my office. And I said, did you hear about the U.S. Supreme Court decision today upholding the city law that prohibits private club discrimination? They said, yes. I said, so may I have lunch there tomorrow? And they said, no. I said, is it still because I'm a woman? Yes.
Wow.
I said, well, I'm going to be taking a red eye tonight. When I get off the plane in New York tomorrow, I will be coming there for lunch. So please have my table ready. So then I flew all night. I got off the plane, called a news conference. I went to the club. Henny Youngman, who was like the most famous person in burlesque in his day, came out, and he tried to prevent me from going in.
Like forcibly or just talking you out of it?
Well, he was making a lot of burlesque jokes.
Mhm.
You're wearing a red suit, you look like a blood clot type of thing.
Oh.
But more importantly than that, there were like men looking out the window and yelling, names for women's genital areas in a pejorative way. And of course, that never deters me.
Right.
And I always say, if they're calling me names, I've won, because that shows they don't have any good argument. Because if they had a good argument, they would give it.
Yes.
But since they can't think of one,
Yeah.
then they just do name calling. So I know then I've won.
Mm-hmm.
So then I let Mr. Henny Youngman tell his jokes, because Friars Club people tell jokes a lot. There are a lot of entertainers there. And I let him have his moment in front of the cameras. And then when he finished, I just touched him gently and I said, Mr. Youngman, you're not stopping progress for women. I am going into the club.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
going to have lunch
Yeah.
there. So I just brushed him aside, which was shocking to him because of his celebrity status. He was used to everybody's, just bowing and scraping essentially.
Of course.
And, agreeing with him. But I'm not there to be anybody's, enable people in their discriminatory tactics.
No.
So I just went in, and then I said to the maitre d', as I promised, I'm here for my lunch. Is my table ready? And he said, yes, Ms. Allred, right this
Wow.
way. And with that, I became the first woman member ever to have lunch at the Friars Club. And I required them in settlement of my claim of discrimination to open up the club to women in each and every aspect of the club, which is what they did. Fast forward 30 years later, 40 years later, I can't remember what year that was, but something like that. Last year, it was the, I think maybe 30th or 40th anniversary of my requiring them